The Auditor General, Edward Oko, is quoted to have said that national schools lack resources to implement their mandate. A report on the upgrading of 85 schools to national status paints a grim picture of the institution's status. Of course, we have 103 national schools that have the capacity to accommodate 31,000 learners. Of course, this expansion or this upgrading has been happening for over the past few years, but the ministry continues to regulate the amount of fees that you can charge a boarding school, which is capped at 53,000 shillings. And schools, according to regulations, are not supposed to hike it until they get clearance from the Ministry of Education, though that is sometimes never followed. So I'm just wondering, why aren't we able to monitor in real time the resources that we send to institutions and the infrastructure that you want to see at those institutions and the quality of education?
Okay, first I'm sad that you say I should not comment on
yes, because of time.
On healthcare. And because matters health and healthcare is such an important thing. So I really wanted to education. Okay, fine.
Yes.
Yeah, but let me just say that in passing that I think there should be a complete review of the healthcare plan by counties. And how they approach, how they offer these services. It's a shame that you hear governors saying that they are not even sure that they are ever going to be able to pay KEMSA for the year. And yet you find that gridlock is causing what you are seeing now in a place like Mpagadi. But then coming to what you want me to comment about is every time, if you look at, for example, the last budget that was passed, the amount requested by the Minister of Education and finally the allocation that goes to education, the difference is probably way more than half of what is requested, and there is no one time. I'm a board member in one of the national schools, that's Alliance Girls, and you can imagine every time when you are having this discussion around how will you run the affairs of the school with the resources that are available, it is a big issue, such that you find sometimes parents have got to revert to some side arrangements which cannot be formalized because you don't want again to cross the lawful requirements. Right. And so at the end of the day, unless we relook at the resources that we allocate to our education sector, there is no way we are going to be able to address this problem. There are very few schools that you can go to, some in the rural areas especially, that you are going to find are offering education services at the level at which you would expect. And that is why, if you look at, for example, the results of the last KCPE, you will find that a majority of the schools that are shining are private institutions, are privately funded, because the public schools do not get adequate resources. Yes, a lot is being done. We would not deny that government has really done what it's probably able to do at this time. But the question is, or the issue is, we have to do a lot much more. There are sacrifices we have to make. And you see, in our country, in every country, every community, we have to make sure that giving a child the opportunity to learn, to educate them, should not be commensurate to what their parents can afford in a private institution. I mean, the quality of life and the opportunity you give to a child cannot be pegged on where the background of their parents or the kind of financial weight they have at this time to be able to take them to private institutions. Right. So I believe that the sooner we fix this, the better. And of course, we have a better country that way.
And I mean, the infrastructure funding for schools is poor. We must have a conversation on that capitation grant that goes to school. That capitation, does it just take care of the cost of maintaining a child in school, or there is an element, it has been costed in such a way that there's an element that supports infrastructure? I've not done deep research on it, but I know that there seems to be a uniform capitation per student. But the crisis in the education system is this. There is just so much uncertainty, which depends on the style and approach of the cabinet secretary in place. You have a situation where when you're going to sit for KCPE, all of a sudden there's a new rule. The last time the new rule was APs walking around with guns in classrooms, and people, including the deputy president and the president, walking around supervising examinations. When you are releasing examinations, there is all of a sudden a new rule. When you're doing selections, there is a new rule.
Right.
When people are going back to school, there is a new NEMIS. When a new curriculum is coming up, you're not sure. I think we need to have an education system that is consistent, that is predictable, that if I choose the way I've chosen, that my child is going to go through the local education system. I know for certainty that in the next 8 or 10 years, this is a system and this is the approach that is going to be subjected to. And that is why many private individuals are sending their children to IGCSE, because it has been established, it is consistent. But the 2.2 trillion budget. Part of it, we must see it going towards infrastructure development, and that money, and finally, and I know this will rub some people the wrong way, this idea of giving members of the National Assembly money for infrastructure development in schools at the constituencies is an idea that needs to be rethought. My view is that we need to include infrastructure development for schools as a conditional grant as part of the allocation of revenue to county governments.
If you look at the relationship between, for example, TSC and the National Union of Teachers, it tells you, it gives you an idea of the kind of the state of affairs that we have in the education center. I mean, when you have teachers threatening to go on strike every season, every 3 or 4 years, that tells you things are not rosy. When you have the likes of Sociona and the rest, you know, posing threats, of course, sometimes
every time,
then that tells you things are not good. If you listen to teachers now all over the country, they have issues with the National Union of Teachers about deployment, about remuneration, about housing, about everything.
The localization.
And so I believe that is one area where there has to be a lot of sobriety, where we have to look at things, and especially with a lot of inclusion of the key players and stakeholders, including the teachers themselves and principals of schools.
All right, thank you so much, Senators Moses Kajwang and Kimani Wamatangi. Just to correct one position that you said, that NEMIS is not entirely new. I think the registration began, or rather concluded, in March 2018. So maybe the operationalization could be the different thing this season, but it's not entirely a new system.
No, Sam, but this is the first time you're having a national
That's why I
admission.
said operationalization.
Yes, this is the first time we're having a national admission, and this is the first time parents are now being told about NEMIS.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much for your views and for coming to Daybreak.